Hello and welcome. It's Dr. Drredfrizzle here again, and today I'm going to talking to you a little bit about control and regulation in humans. Right, so first of all, how do we regulate our temperature, and what is maintaining a constant internal environment inside our bodies known as? Well, the key word here is homeostasis. Homeostasis refers to the fact that we can monitor our internal conditions inside our body and try and keep them constant. So the idea of keeping a constant internal environment is known as homeostasis. Now, how does our body maintain a constant internal environment? Well, there's quite a lot of things involved with this. So first of all, you've got your hypothalamus in your brain. There's a specific part of this known as your thermoregulatory centre. So right up there. And what that does, as you probably guessed by the thermo bit, it's used to maintain a constant temperature. So what our body can do is there's a number of mechanisms to control temperature. So first of all, we have things like sweating. We can have shivering. We can have vasodilation. We can have vasoconstriction. Right, okay, so sweating obviously is used to cool us down, shivering is used to warm us up, vasodilation is used to vasodilation. What all that basically means is it means that the blood flow to the skin is faster, which can be used to warm us up again. Vasoconstriction is where the blood supply towards the skin is like shut off. And there's also another mechanism, which is the erector pili muscle. It involves erector pili. What this is it's a muscle which controls the erection of hairs and stuff. So supposing we're really cold, what we want to do is all our hairs on our skin will stand up on end and will become erect. And what it does is it traps a layer of air, which can be used for insulation and stuff. That the erector pili muscle is relaxed when we're cold, for example, when we're hot, for example, sorry, which means that the hairs lie flat, which can be used for insulation, so it prevents cold air reaching our skin. Right, okay, so I'll discuss with you a little bit about the mechanisms of how the thermoregulatory centre controls temperature, but there's a lot of other things that are controlled within the body. It's not only temperature, you can have things like blood glucose. I'm not going to go into too much detail with this because you don't actually need to know this. Blood glucose, you can have blood pressure, you can have carbon dioxide concentration. Right, okay. And there's something else that can be used to actually control our, to actually keep a constant environment, which is this idea of hormones. So certain hormones are used like insulin. Insulin, for example, is used to reduce blood glucose levels. So right up here, insulin for reduction, because it's used to reduce the blood glucose level. And there's also hormones associated with increasing the blood glucose level, which are hormones like glucagon, for example. And you also have things like blood pressure control and carbon dioxide control. Okay, so I'll discuss with you this idea of temperature. The reason why we need to make sure that our temperature actually keeps at the correct temperature is to enable our enzymes to work properly. So enzymes are proteins which are used in digestion. I might have mentioned that before. And the reason why we need them to work efficiently is because there's certain reactions that take place in the body that are vital for life, which can't actually take place unless the enzymes are working efficiently. So that's basically why temperature needs to be maintained. And the other thing is there's quite a few glands that are used to actually secrete these particular hormones, like glucagon, as I mentioned before, and insulin to reduce blood glucose level and glucagon to increase it. There's certain glands that actually secrete these various hormones. So we have our ovaries, which secrete hormones known as estrogen and progesterone. You don't really need to know what progesterone actually does, but you need to know what estrogen does. And what estrogen does is it suppresses FSH production, which is another hormone. So I'll draw FSH with an arrow going down, and LH, it increases the production of a hormone known as LH. What FSH does is it matures the egg in the ovary. If you remember, if you cast your mind back to when I presented a previous video on sexual organs and stuff, you should recall this from then. You should recall the actual glands from then, like the ovaries and the testes. You shouldn't recall these hormones because I didn't actually talk about them before. But anyway, LH is used to stimulate the release of the egg when it's mature. FSH is used to mature the egg in the ovary. When there's a high level of LH, the egg will be released down the fallopian tube, and then it will like nestle in on the uterus lining, where it will develop into a baby, like inside the amnion with the amniotic fluid, as I mentioned before. You also have your thyroid gland, which secretes a hormone known as thyroxine. Now, what thyroxine does is it controls metabolic rate, which all that means is it controls the rate of reactions in our body. Well, we don't want our rate of reactions to be too slow, otherwise we can't digest things very quickly and efficiently, and we can't actually function at our optimum level. So other things here, I've mentioned effectors. Effectors are basically what responds to the stimulus. It is slightly different to what detects the stimulus. There's only a subtle difference though, and you need to know the differences really. An effector is like a muscle, or it can even be the gland that secretes the hormone. Supposing you have a stimulus, which is any change in our environment, like supposing the stimulus is coldness, for example, the effector is usually a muscle or a gland. So supposing, as I said before, like we're cold, what we need to do is our hairs on our skin will need to become erect, and this is controlled by the erector pili muscle, as I mentioned before. So it's either an effector, can be a gland secreting a hormone to reduce the stimulus, or a change in the environment. So supposing we have a high blood glucose level, we'll secrete a hormone which is known as insulin, and the actual hormone that secretes the insulin is known as the effector in that case. Whereas, as I just mentioned before, the erector pili muscle in your skin, which controls like the erection of hairs, could actually be an effector as well. So that's this whole idea of effectors. Right. So what we want to do is we want to try and maintain this constant internal environment in our body. We like to keep our body functioning properly. So I've discussed control and regulation in humans. Right. What I'll probably do in my next video is I'll discuss with you the control and regulation of hormones in plants, which is slightly different. But the same principles apply that I've just sort of mentioned. So I hope this is helpful. And I hope you understand about this. Obviously, you might need to watch this video a number of times before you actually fully understand what I'm actually talking about. But I'm just trying to present it in a clear and easy way to understand. So I hope this has been helpful, and I'll see you in the next video on plants.